The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its taste, with what can it be seasoned? It is no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city set on a mountain cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and then put it under a bushel basket. It is set on a lampstand, where it gives light to all in the house. Just so your light must shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your heavenly Father." The Gospel of the Lord. One day, as usual, a young girl stood on a street corner begging for food, money, whatever she could get. She was filthy, disheveled, wearing tattered clothes. And as it happens, a well-to-do young man passed by that corner without even giving the girl a second look. But when he got home, to his warm and comfortable home, sat with his family, his thoughts began to turn back to that young girl on the street corner. And he became very angry at God for allowing something like that to exist. And he reproached God. He yelled at God, saying, "How can you let this happen? Why don't you do something to help this girl?" In the depths of his heart, that young man heard God's answer. "I did," God said. "I created you." Today's gospel comes from our continuous reading of the Sermon on the Mount. If you want to know more about the Sermon on the Mount, this is an unabashed commercial. If you want to know more about the Sermon on the Mount, I'm teaching a 4-week course on the Sermon on the Mount starting on this Wednesday at the CIC. The information is in the bulletin. So if you don't want to hear me preach for 4 or 5 hours, which I could easily do on the Sermon on the Mount, come and learn all you want to know about it in my class at the CIC. Commercial over. 2 images are given in this part of the Sermon on the Mount: salt and light. Now, salt, we look today at salt with sort of a jaded eye. The health police keep telling us that we should avoid salt. Those of us who have or have had high blood pressure know that salt is a no-no. It's a necessary evil. We need to have some, but keep salt at a distance. But that's not always been true. In Jesus' day, salt was more valuable than gold. Salt was the stuff of life. They didn't have refrigerators back in those days and freezers. If they were to preserve food, they did it by salting it. And they salted everything. They salted meat, they salted bread, they salted vegetables. That's what preserved it. That's what also gave flavor. They didn't have the plethora of spices. A good citizen of Rome couldn't go into the Roman version of D&W and have a spice rack. Spices were tremendously expensive and very rare. But salt was there. Salt was a basis of life. In fact, our word salary today comes from the Latin word salarium, which means it's the stipend that a soldier was given, a Roman soldier was given specifically to buy salt. In some areas of the empire, salt was so valuable that the soldiers were actually paid in salt. Salt was the stuff of life. Salt made life livable. What Jesus is saying to his disciples and to us is we are what makes life livable. We are the stuff that gives flavor to life. We are the stuff that brings life to life. That's how important Jesus sees us to his mission. It doesn't say God is the salt of the earth. Jesus doesn't say I am the salt of the earth. Jesus says you are the salt of the earth. Now God creates the salt. God makes the salt available to us. But we are the ones that have to bring that life to the world. If we don't do it, then it is the salt that has lost its flavor. And what can be done at that point? We are the light of the world, Jesus says. Now, we don't think much about light in this day and age. When it gets dark, you flip the switch on and the lights come on. The only time we use candles are at church or, for the romantic evening or for the occasion when we really had a bad week. And on Friday night, we filled the bathtub full of bath salts and bubbles and put a few candles around and put the stereo on and just kind of relax and veg for a while. Or in emergencies. The only time we really think of light and the real necessity of it is when we have a blackout. And we don't have it. But for some of us who suffer from what's called seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, we're affected by the amount of light. For me, sunlight is very important. My mood changes radically when the sun is not out. And I don't have it bad. I have a very mild case of seasonal affective disorder. I have a friend who in the wintertime can't go outside. I mean, she sits in front of this big light panel, and that's the only way she can function during the day. So bad does her depression become in the winter because of the lack of light. We sometimes forget how important light is to us. Never mind the vitamin C and the vitamin D we get from sunlight, all of that kind of stuff. But how essential to life light is. We're one of the first generations, this 20th century generation, one of the first that can work at night. For centuries upon centuries upon centuries, when it got dark, people went to bed. And when it got light, people got up. Because there was nothing to do at night. It was dark. It was a time of fear. From ghoulies and ghosties and long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night, Lord, protect us. An old Celtic prayer. The night brought about evil. The night brought about darkness. But Jesus is always symbolized as light. He brings light into the world. The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. And now Jesus says to us, we are the light of the world. We take up the light that Jesus has brought into the world, and we enlighten the darkness of the world. Why does not God lighten the world? And God says, I did enlighten the world. I gave you Jesus and I created you. Don't hide your light under a bushel basket. Now, some lights are brighter than others. Some people are meant to shine brighter than others. Some people are meant to have little tiny lights. But even if you look at your own family, go through your rooms. Some places you have big fancy lights so that you can read. Other places you have little night lights so you can see at night to keep you safe in the darkness so you don't trip down the stairs. Or like some of us who are a little older that have to get up and ease nature in the middle of the night, don't trip over your shoes and your clothes and all the other stuff you got strewn all over the floor. We need light. And Jesus says, we are the light of the world. If we refuse to be that light, we're sticking ourselves under the bushel basket. If we refuse to be that salt, we are allowing life to be unhealthy. We are allowing life to be unflavored. We are allowing life to be unprotected. Can we do everything? No. Can we be light to everybody? No. Can we bring life to everybody? No. But that's not what Jesus said to us. Jesus didn't say to me one day, Tom, you have got to go out and be the light to the entire world. or bring flavor and wonder to all the world. No. He said, do what you can do. He said, come to Grand Rapids and do the best you can in Grand Rapids. When I was in Tennessee, he said, in Tennessee, do the best you can. When I was on the missions, he said, go from place to place, wherever you are, and do the best you can. And that's what he says to each of us. We don't have to do the whole world. We got a whole world full of people that Jesus says this to. But we have to do our part. We have to do our part. We have to do what God has asked us to do, each in our own way. Because as I said before, there are many people that will never hear my brilliance, that will never see the brilliance of my light, whose life will never be enlivened by the salt that I bring them. You don't know how lucky you people are, having had that privilege. There are some people that will never have that privilege. But at the same time, there are some people that will meet you and will have the great privilege of seeing your light and being enlivened by the salt that you are for the earth. There once was a pastor who, thinking about his retirement, bought a large piece of real estate, a part of an old ranch. And he wanted to develop it and use it sort of as a retirement home and a retirement property. So while he was still active, once a week on his day off, the pastor would go out to his land and begin to do the work to develop it. But he had no idea what he was getting himself in for. It didn't take him very long to realize that what he had actually bought were several acres of weeds, gopher holes, and run-down old buildings. It was hardly attractive, but the pastor knew it had some potential, so he said, okay, I'm going to stick with it. Week after week after week on his day off, he would go to his ranch, crank up his small tractor, and spend the day plowing weeds with vengeance. He would mix cement, he would fix buildings, he would cut lumber, replace broken windows, work on the plumbing and the electricity. It was a lot of hard work. But after a while, the place began to take shape. And after a while, every time he went there and he did his work, he was beginning to feel good about it. His labor was paying off. After a couple of years, the project was completed. And one day, while the pastor was working on his ranch, Farmer Brown, the next door neighbor, came over to see what was going on. And he kind of took a look at the preacher and took a look at the land. And he said, you know, preacher, looks like you and God did some really good work here. The pastor wiped the sweat from his brow and said, you know, Mr. Brown, it's interesting you should say that. But I've got to tell you something. You should have seen this place when God had it all by himself.